Many thanks for joining us tonight. Now, the National Super Alliance leadership today signed a power-sharing deal that will see them forge a common front in the August 8th elections. The highlights of the deal includes proposals for the position of chief minister, which would go to the NASA ticket aspirant who emerges third in the alliance presidential race. The devil remains in the detail, but it appears the opposition alliance is determined to hold.
For anybody who thought that opposition unity is impossible in Kenya, today is your answer. For anybody who thought that NASA is just a dream, please today wake up, because NASA is here and the journey has begun.
Na timu zetu za kuwaambia Wakenya leo hii ya kwamba msisimuko mpya umefika nchi yetu, mwamko mpya uko hapa, na Wakenya sasa wanafunga safari ya kwenda kubadilisha vile mambo yetu inaendeshwa katika nchi yetu. Sisi wane tukiwa hapa tunawahakikishia Wakenya ya kwamba sisi tuna imani, na imani yetu itatupeleka mpaka kule tunataka kwenda. Imani yetu itatusaidia kusimama pamoja. Imani yetu itawezesha Wakenya wenye nia njema, na ni wengi kuliko wale wenye nia mbaya.
Right, so we want to get straight into that discussion, but first let me introduce our panel tonight. And to my immediate right is Faith Rono, who is a communications specialist, not new to the show. Many thanks for joining us again tonight. We have Wangari Mwikia, who is the MD of Expertise Global. Many thanks for joining us. And Betty Waitherero, who is a political communications researcher. Many thanks for joining us, ladies. And I'll begin with you, Faith. We've seen this deal that was signed today by NASA, the newest coalition in town. What is your assessment of this, and what does it change for this coalition?
Okay, I think I will just start first by saying that as we have seen today, what happened today is actually NASA basically making it, having it, the coalition made a legal entity, because as it were, it was just in saying and not actually in paper, and so that is why they were signing this pact and then presenting to the register of political parties. However, I mean, for me, I don't think, of course, it was really publicized. It was all over the media, the fact that now they're reaching a deal. I totally believe that they would hold. I, however, expected, to see something different, having launched some sort of MOU between the four leaders of the various parties under NASA. I was expecting to see them, address issues or use the opportunity to just tell Kenyans what exactly are we bringing to the table. Definitely they talked about, issues to do with
But one would argue that this is purely an administration thing, that just, making
and that is a problem we have in this country, because every political party, the political class is out there to, just play tribal politics. And that is exactly what we saw today. Saying we are giving the third best, chief minister or whatever you can call it, prime minister, and the fourth one could become the speaker and so forth. And so Kenyans are being played to that narrative where we are not looking at ideologies, but we are just looking at, the tribal narrative, the ethnic-based narrative. And so for me,
it didn't... Is this something you agree with, that did you expect more from today's event by this now
I can't say I expected more, because, I mean, I've lived long enough to see the politics play out in Kenya the way they do. I mean, not to say that I don't have hope that sometime it will change, but I didn't really expect that much. As we know, they huddled together in the middle of the night to come up with this agreement, so I didn't really expect it to be very substantial. But by the same token... I mean, no, it's true. I mean, what can you come up with in the middle of the night? But I do believe that they are going in the right direction. I believe forming a coalition. Right now, Kenya is really, the politics is really in its infancy. I kind of smiled when I heard Faye say, standing behind ideologies. We never do that. We always stand behind tribal politics. And
our coalitions are pretty much
exactly. And so now everything becomes about a power sharing deal. This chief minister position, of what use will it be to me as a citizen? Why is this position important to me as a Kenyan? Is it just to balance out the tribal representation? Maybe that's the reality of Kenya, and that's just the way that we have to deal with it. But I really hope that it holds. I do expect to see some wrangling, maybe because they have to compete. It's like a competition now.
Right.
There are four main principles.
Right.
Only 3 positions of any meaning. And so are we going to see a lot of fighting in the primaries, back and forth? So
all right.
I don't know.
And of course, in that document, Betty, they state that the flag bearers, it's going to be purely based on popularity. Are you also underwhelmed with regard to this whole creation of a new position that would give everyone, all the leaders power?
I'll give Kenyans a little bit of background. The idea behind creating documents that solidify a sort of coalition. And this is not the first time that Raila Odinga has been involved in something like this. But in 2002, he came up with a memorandum of understanding, the famous one, between him and Mwai Kibaki at the time, which later on he claimed that Mwai Kibaki did not hold up his end of the bargain.
Right.
So it is something a tool that he uses, a political tool that he uses to try and get people to, come onto his side, which I think is a fair enough deal.
Right.
Because I think that of all the people who have ever dealt with Raila Odinga, Kalonzo Musyoka may have signed a few more documents than he should have. But that's my opinion. But I think that he's fair enough to at least put into writing what he offers. And for the principals, they know what they're going to get.
Right.
But for the voters, and this is something that Wangari has brought up, what does that mean for us as the voters?
Right.
If you people have already shared out the national cake in terms of what positions you will gain when we vote for you, what are we, going to gain? So I would like to see the details in the documents that they have signed. Earlier, just before the show, we had the opportunity to speak briefly to Hassan Omar of Wiper Party, and I feel optimistic given the kind of talk he was giving. So I want to see what they have to say.
All right, we're just going to be staying with NASA, and the launch has brought about questions on who will be the flag bearer. The signed deal clearly indicates that NASA flag bearer must be the most popular candidate among the 4. Who do you think is likely to become the flag bearer?
Na ndugu zangu hapa, Mheshimiwa Kalonzo Musyoka, Musalia Mudavadi na Moses Wetangula kusimama pamoja. Wameonyesha ya kwamba wao wenyewe wana kiu na uchungu ya kuona kwamba Wakenya wameokolewa.
All right, and of course, many analysts saying, of course, it's tactical. The delay in naming their flag bearer so that they don't give the Jubilee Party the advantage of, maneuvering. Is this something that you agree with? I'll begin with you, Wangari.
I don't know. I wondered about that because I was thinking, wouldn't it be more prudent, or wasn't it better to name your flag bearer and then start the campaign and put all your resources behind putting this flag bearer, putting him in office, But then again, I thought about the other side. I said, well, this actually is like a drama. It's playing out on TV. Who is going to be the winner? Kenya's next top. I mean, it's
keeping
really,
everyone at the edge of their seat.
Yeah, so it's almost like free publicity. So I think, it's interesting. I think Raila is the most dominant figure of the 4. He's always been the yin to everybody else's yang, whoever is running for office. So
right.
I
Faith,
see that.
do you think it's an obvious thing if we're playing a popular votes?
I think, like I've said before, and I said it the last time I was in this show, that, NASA I think they have a very solid strategy on just delaying the naming of the presidential flag bearer for obvious reasons, like you said. We know that there are principles in that deal that are very easy to sway, and so NASA just saying that, let's wait and see. Of course, they have a deadline. I think the deadline has been brought back to March from May.
Right.
And so they would definitely, but it's not about the flag bearer. I think it's not, of course, we know he's popular. Raila Odinga is the most popular. So we can already say that, okay, they have picked Raila Odinga, from...
So what's the play for the other leaders if it's obvious that Raila is there?
I think that NASA is finally catching up to the game, where they've realized that this is no longer just about the presidential elections, because it's very obvious who's the most popular presidential flag bearer amongst the four. But NASA is actually using this sort of silence over the flag bearer to sort of solidify the individual parties at the grassroots levels. It would be interesting to see the sort of turnout in terms of aspirants, and if the NASA coalition itself can support each and every aspirant under one umbrella, instead of what we have been hearing before, especially from Wiper Party, that they would each individually field candidates, which would mean obviously that you split your votes.
Right.
And once you split your votes, it becomes a mess for the presidential flag bearer.
All right.
So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Okay, and of course, if the new voter registration is anything to go by, we know this is going to be a very tight race, that in terms of the registered voters for each, of the two major coalitions, it's really a tight race. And what kind of optics, and I'll start with you because you're a political researcher, what kind of optics are we looking at in terms of strategies CORD may want to use in picking out their flag bearers?
And so it's very interesting that you said CORD, because actually NASA and CORD, there's no difference. Yeah, the only difference is that now Mudavadi has joined the fray. So in terms of strategy, now what IEBC has reported is about half of what their intended target was, which to me is utterly disappointing. And I think that in terms of support, IEBC needs the most support at this point in time to actually get more and more Kenyans to participate in this democratic process. And I'll say that for the sake of the legitimacy of this process. Beyond that, in terms of a strategy, what NASA can do is, and I've seen a lot of bloggers go ahead and, add the maths, as they say, add the sort of registration, number of people registered in the different NASA zones. But that's a very presumptive approach. Instead, you have to think about it this way. Are you able to field candidates that the people at the grassroots are interested in? Because we know that the best candidate is Raila Odinga.
Right.
And it's just that simple. Are you able to field candidates that the people support at the grassroots level? And it's just that simple. If you can do that within your strongholds, then you have a very good chance. Can you do that now beyond your strongholds? And that is an interesting part.
All right. And just talking about the opposition politics, Faith, of course, there has been a lot of talk of voter apathy, that Kenyans, I really don't care. You've gotten to a place of just sort of giving up on what's going to happen because it's not different anyway. And do you think, as they are, NASA present Kenyans, an option of an alternative leadership? Ideally speaking.
We don't have an alternative. We don't have an alternative figure in all this. I mean, we are looking at Raila Odinga has been there, Musalia Mudavadi has been there, Kalonzo Musyoka has been there. What have they done for Kenyans?
Right.
What is it that is new that they're bringing to the table and saying, look, we need a third force, which we don't have at this point.
All right, we'll hold it at that and move to the next story. And Jubilee Party yesterday suffered yet another blow after some of its members defected to KANU and PNU. The more than 100 aspirants have cited lack of democracy and regional balance as the reason of quitting. Is this a sign of trouble in the Jubilee Party that now wants the Independent and Electoral Boundaries Commission to conduct its party primaries? All right, so that particular defection that we saw yesterday, and this politician citing, a lack of democracy, is this really the case, or because we do know that there's a lot of competition in terms of getting the nominations? What is your assessment of that?
I think what I see is that This is a direct result of the parties not investing in their candidates in period between elections. I think if you're able to come up with a strategy, and I think this is, I'm most speaking directly to the party leaders and the secretary generals of the parties, you need to invest in the people who brought you to power. Over the years, not just the year before election and in the election year, you need to make sure that everybody gets their piece of the pie, quote unquote, so that when it comes to election year, you're able to retain the membership.
Loyalties.
Exactly. I mean, there's always here and there. There should be defections at the margin. I think that's normal. But to have this large number of Jubilee members suddenly leave, and most of them from other tribes than the dominant tribe of Jubilee, which is the Kikuyus, that is, the optics, I think, are really bad, and I think it will have a very negative effect.
Do you agree, Betty, that the optics of this are really bad? Does it paint to squabbles at the Jubilee party?
I'll tell you something about Jubilee that they refuse to acknowledge, is that this particular party is the most hegemonic of its sort in the that has come up as a new party in the last few years. And I'll say this without fear, because you see, if you watch the way Jubilee conducts itself as a party, there's always that affiliation to the Kikuyu hegemony. And if you see people who have come willingly, 12 political parties merged willingly to become part of this one great party, and having said that, you can see that there is that struggle in terms of cultural differences, in terms of letting people breathe. And the people who can't breathe the most are the women in Jubilee Party. And that one, I'll say it for free. Beyond that, you'll also notice that laws like the Election Laws Amendments Act that create the locking-in principle force people to move away, because they know that in this hegemonic situation where the patriarchies are colliding, and the sort of culture and ethnic, how do you call it? Affiliations are working against me. I will not make it, so they will move out.
All right, Faith, do you agree with that, or is this just simply a matter of convenience? Like, I want a vehicle that's going to drive me into that seat.
No. The options are, I actually agree with Wangari and Betty that definitely there are squabbles in Jubilee. You look at the North Rift region, the Rift Valley region at large. You look at a very unhappy region, which is one of the richest regions for Jubilee Party. But having said that, also we remember that we have the anti-party hopping law. Now, you cannot, party hop after nominations. And so it's actually part of a realignment that we always witness every electioneering period. And remember, this is not the first time. Last year...
And we saw the Council of Governors went to court
to try and block that law. And last year, we saw about 200 Jubilee Party members defecting to Wiper in October. We have seen quite a number of them. And it's not just Jubilee, it's also CORD. We have seen, CORD members defecting to Jubilee or to other parties. And so it's a political realignment that we actually see in every electioneering period.
So it's expected, because
it is
like
expected,
they say, there's no permanent friends, no permanent
it's
enemies.
Politics, and for me, it speaks to also the kind of, political conversation that we have in this country. It is back to, let me realign myself, so that I can get to this party now. If it's easier for me to get a nomination ticket in Kanu, and so because Jubilee Party definitely has...
Because they also have their own internal politics in terms of who you can presume has the favor of the...
Exactly, and remember, in most regions, Jubilee Party has not fielded, but you can see that they have, for women representative, for MPs, they have quite a number of aspirants. And so, these members are saying, definitely I cannot win, so let me realign myself and...
All right. Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to the next one now. And hundreds of people have been forced to flee their homes as bandit attacks intensified in Baringo County over the past 4 days. The bandits are said to be engaging security officers in a fierce exchange of fire. On Saturday, a ward representative and a parliamentary aspirant from Tiati constituency seat was shot dead at a nightclub in Marigat Town, Baringo South. Is the national government doing enough to stem the rising cases of insecurity in that region? And of course, we've seen a number. There has been a spate of such matters of insecurity in that region, but this is so concentrated in 4 days and what can we read into that, Wangari?
I think part of the story, I think there are two parts of the story. One, it's an election year, so I think there's a lot of insecurity around, the elections and that kind of aura that's happening. But the second thing, one of the other things is also the drought, because a lot of the fighting and the insecurities around cattle rustling, and cattle rustlers usually try to they rustle because their own herds are being decimated.
Right.
So you see a lot of insecurity in these regions. Now, I'm not quite sure why it's concentrated in this region, in Baringo, but definitely I think there should be more action on the part of the Kaiseri.
Right.
It needs to send people in. I think we're concentrating a lot on the borders, but sending KDF and everybody out to protect our borders. But we don't have a strategy to look at our internal matters.
Security.
And I think they need to have a holistic plan. You can't just put all your resources in one area and ignore the internal, he's the interior.
Right.
So I think there's more to be done there.
Betty, do you think the government is doing enough? Like we've seen a lot in just 4 days. Are we seeing enough, response and proactive action actually from the government?
Okay, what we have to remember is the North Rift region suffers from perennial intractable conflicts, and Baringo County is one of those counties that will consistently suffer intractable conflicts, and that means that conflict is part of the culture, it's part of the way of life for these people.
And the same thing is happening in Laikipia at the same time, right?
And as I said, especially the North Rift region, intractable conflicts are part of the culture, they are systemic. And so when we're talking about the government stepping in, I'll tell you something. They stepped in, and in the last, between 2012 and 2016, we lost 300 policemen in that same region.
Yes.
So when we're talking about government stepping in, there's only so much government can do. Remember, this area is very large. It is wild mostly, and security in that area is largely retained.
But can we say that, the strategies that the government has put, can we actually see proactive efforts? Like, do we have boots on the ground? Because this is an area that has a protected kind of insecurity.
I agree with you. In fact, what I'm saying is that not only are they trying to send security in, but the security is being killed when they go in. That's a reminder.
So it's a bigger problem.
And so it's a bigger problem than you can think. And when you have an election cycle, the problem escalates.
So this is political.
I think there is a political angle to it.
There's definitely a political angle to it. But I remember last year, because I know that region very well, about 20,000 people were displaced. This is a systemic problem, like Betty has said. It's not the first time it's happening. I don't think the government has put in place enough machinery, especially in Baringo, and especially in Baringo South. I don't think the government has given it the seriousness that it deserves. I know in Egeo Marakwet, for instance, where they face the same issue between the Marakwets and the Pokots, Inspector General of Police Boynet actually even visited the area, just did a recce and sent out officers to that area. Baringo South, I can say, has been left out.
Right.
Yeah, without blinking an eye. They have cultural issues, but government cannot just run away from its responsibility.
And just say that this is, this is...
Exactly. And they know that this happened last year. It's something that has been happening. It's systemic. And so there has to be policies and measures that have been put in place to ensure that this doesn't happen. And the senator for Baringo, Gideon Moi, actually said, and it's not just Gideon Moi saying this, but also leaders from that region have said that we need to declare this a crisis.
Right.
Remember that the Parliamentary Committee on Security, the chair, is the MP, Tiati MP, Asman Kamama. He comes from that region.
Exactly. So it's a bit of an irony there, right?
It is an irony.
It's really disappointing to me, because if this is a systemic problem, it happens without fail. Why isn't there a strategy that addresses this? I mean, every year it's going to happen. So
Okay. Before we move on to the next discussion, just to engage our viewers on our Twitter poll today, and we are asking you, do you think the delay in naming NASA's flag bearer is weakening the coalition? Do you think the delay in naming the NASA's flag bearer is weakening the coalition? Do tweet us your views on this at KTN News or directly to me at Sharon_Momanyi, and I shall be sampling your views as we continue with our discussions.